Poverty is not just the absence of money, but the absence of opportunity. And the United States is a country where you have both freedom and abundant opportunities. And moving to the United States has given me both. I grew up in Lagos, Nigeria. I came from a close-knit family. I was the third of four children. And the best thing that my parents gave me was the gift of education. Even though I came from a poor family, they gave me education with the instruction that this is the tool that will help me to dig my way out of poverty and ignorance. But what my parents did was that they instilled in us the value of faith, hard work, and not giving up. They made us realize that if you put in the work, you will definitely get the reward. I came without a dime in my pocket. All I had was big dreams, determination to succeed, and the resilience. I got my first job at the age of 14. My job was on a construction site. My duties were to move concrete on a large pan from one end of the construction site to another one. I worked on that day from around 6 in the morning to about 7 at night. At the end of the day, the employer refused to pay me. And the reason was because she did not authorize the foreman to hire me. So I worked from sunup to sundown and didn't get paid. That tore up my spirit. And from that moment on, I decided that I was going to become a lawyer. And I was going to use every ounce of strength within me to fight against injustice, regardless of how powerful the opponent is. I am a man that worked my way up from nothing. I know what it means to feel like you're being unfairly treated, and I'm the person that can stand up to opponents regardless of how big or how powerful they are.
I'm going to reframe the great attrition to be the great attraction. Being a game changer, especially in my role, is really being a selfless individual. It's being able literally to put everyone else in front of you. Because when you are building a foundation for a company, you're always thinking of what is the best interest of the company, what is the best interest of this person. And if I don't do this, am I doing a disservice to that person?
It's probably unreasonable, but guess what? It is a mission.
Wow, welcome to this episode of Legal Angle with Emmanuel the Law Olawale. As you can see from that introduction, my guest today is Jessica Mogill. She is the head of coaching strategies for CRISP, the number one law firm growth country in the United States. She is a leader of leaders. She coaches other coaches. Welcome to the show, Jessica.
Thank you so much. I am truly honored to be on here, and just watching your video again and again, it's just so inspirational.
Oh, thank you, and thank you for doing such a great job because Crisp made that video. So just in case if you're watching that videos and you're wondering, wow, who made those videos? They did. Thank you.
Thank you.
And thank you for coming on the show once again. So today we're going to be talking about your journey, how you became you start coaching people. You're not just coaching ordinary people, you're coaching leaders, you're coaching law firm owners. Tell us a bit more about yourself.
Absolutely. So I grew up in Alabama, of all places, and I so much resonated, especially with your video. My mom is actually an immigrant, so she's a refugee from Vietnam, and grew up there. Always loved math and numbers, and I knew I didn't really want to be a teacher, and that really just kind of fell in my lap to say, you know what, you're going to be an engineer. And I never in a million years thought I would end up, of course, where I am today. Did engineering for several years, honestly, and that was a space much like the legal industry. Not very many women were there, still not, and so it was just a heavy population of men, of course. But learned so much. I mean, all through school, I constantly was thinking about efficiencies and operations. Didn't really even fully understand industrial engineering probably at the time, but I could not go into a restaurant without thinking like, how could this flow better? How could it be optimized? How could we save time? How could we make the experience better? And so that has just been ingrained in me for, over 20 years now. And here I am, a complete other side of the world doing other things. But I think all of that really led me to where I am today.
Wow. What was it like growing up in Alabama, a child of immigrant parents?
Yes. So there are not many Vietnamese people in Alabama, as one could imagine. So that was a little bit different from that standpoint. I kind of joke about that, but I probably was one of the only Asian kids growing up in my high school. Um, But I didn't know that it was any different, honestly, growing up with that. It was that's just who I was and how it was, and so, but coupling that with, my dad being from Alabama and just that total mix now, and it's so funny because my mom is this tiny little Vietnamese lady with the thickest Southern accent that you would ever hear now.
So, growing up, when you realized that you love numbers, what made you decide to pursue engineering?
Yes. So it's funny, actually, if you ask my parents about my love for numbers, I would actually, people use cash a lot more than they do now, but we would be at the grocery store. My mom would joke, I would try to count the change back before the cashier would give it back. Like my mind just never stopped with math and numbers. And so, um, engineering kind of fell in my lap. I wasn't necessarily pursuing it. Like I said, I didn't really want to be a teacher. Accounting wasn't really in my cards either, and then honestly, I got a full ride, for a college scholarship through the College of Engineering, and that made it a very easy, decision for me to go down that path.
So, while you were in college, did you see yourself as being, like practicing as an engineer, or did you always have this fantasy that there could be something else out there?
I think I just thought I would be an engineer. It's so funny in hindsight when you think about like 18-year-olds and 20-year-olds, and it's like, what do they even know is out there? And so I don't think I realized that, there is more out there. And so I did everything from huge corporation. I worked in GE, oil and gas, to a smaller company doing engineering sales. And that was probably the position where I really realized, like, I don't know that I'm really truly passionate about this. And at the time, I did not obviously know Colby or Prent that we talk so much about now. But had I known it then, I don't know that I would have pursued the same paths that I did when it came to actual, in the warehouses doing engineering. And so took a total leap of faith, went into really a coaching and consulting role, working with medical practices, which was totally off the grid, nothing I had ever anticipated doing, but it really was such an impetus behind, where I am today.
So, after you left engineering, how did you decide how did you decide what to do next? Because you found out it wasn't your passion. So, it
Yeah,
wasn't your
yeah,
passion, but then you were looking for your purpose. How did you discover your purpose?
that's such a great question. So I saw actually back to even school, I had some friends who were working for a company and I saw them traveling just all across the country. They were road warriors, having like the best experience doing things. And I was like, I wonder what it is that they do. I had a travel bug in me. I knew, even when I graduated college, I knew I was not going to go back to Alabama. There was so much more out there. My grandpa always told me, like, travel, do everything that you can. No one can ever take those experiences away from you. And that was really what kind of stemmed that. And, I've trained over 1,000 offices now throughout the country in various areas. And through all of that, I started really seeing the change that I was making in those. And so it's really hard to even imagine that, when you're 25 and you're going into some office and trying to train them and coach them. And you don't really know like the long-term impact of that. But when you start seeing that ripple effect, it's really rewarding and you just want to keep doing more and more of it.
Wow, that's very powerful because what you just told us is that when your passion collided with your purpose, you became fulfilled and you're just training all these leaders, and the way you felt was different from the way you were feeling when you were working as an engineer.
Exactly. Exactly.
And how did you discover your passion for coaching people?
Yes. So it's crazy because I've always had this innate thing where people tend to just open up to me. I've never really asked for that. My dad is actually a social worker, and so he did ask for that, and he gets that very naturally. He's done everything from working with AA groups to students in a university, and that's just who he is. And I think that I definitely got that from him in terms of people just being able to open up to me and have open and real conversations. And so as I started doing more and more of that, I just realized like there's so much we can help people with. And I don't ever, Michael and I are very much of such an abundance mindset with things that are like, why withhold this information? Like if I know this and I've gone through all of these things, I, have been with Crisp almost 9 years now. If I can take any of these lessons that I've learned and help someone else's life, even if it's just one, be better in a certain area, like why not do that?
Mhm. You mentioned that you've been with Chris for 9 years. How did it start?
Great question. So I always tell people it was a 30-day stint, which is actually, that is the truth. So Michael and I were together. So he did CRISP for about 2 years without me. And then what I did is come on for 30 days, which was going to be, just a contract position. I was trying to figure out what I wanted to do next. I loved my road warrior life of traveling, but I was kind of at a pivotal moment where I was like, I'm not going to do this forever. So I'm going to go help Michael for 30 days. And at the time, the company was about 7 people. And so I was very honest with him. And I was like, 30 days, I'll come in, I'll make some processes, clean it up a little bit. And I really don't know that you're going to have any work for me beyond that. And I can confidently say almost 9 years later that I have never run out of work or been bored at Crisp. So, but yeah, it started out for me just to come in and clean up some things. And here we are. And it's crazy in hindsight of just like how much we have built and done since then to now have a team of over 100 people.
30 days to almost a decade. If you
Correct.
have to look back to that first day at Crisp, what was it like for you?
Oh, the first year at Crisp, I don't know that anyone who knows us now would recognize that business. When I came in, it was a little bit of a zoo. And, people showed up when they wanted to show up. They might not show up even. There were really there were no processes in place. There was no training. There was really no process around hiring or anything. It was kind of a free for all. And really what I was able to do is bring a lot of this knowledge because I had already been in so many small businesses, and I was able to bring that to Michael because just like any attorney or doctor or even Michael, he's like, "Hey, I'm an entrepreneur. I'm going to do this." But no one teaches you these things. No one teaches you that maybe you should have a process behind the way that your client experience is. No one teaches you maybe you should have some standards when you hire. And yeah, it was the wild, wild west when I came in.
Wild Wild West when you came in, where you tamed that Wild Wild West and you made it
Yes.
profitable. Yes.
For better or for worse, I tamed it.
How did your experience as an engineer, how did it translate to how did it translate to your coaching?
Yes. So my mind has always just really functioned in operations as a whole. Everything is a process in my head. Everything has steps in my head. Everything, like there's a right way, there's a wrong way. And truly, what it came down to is that everything is operations. And Michael will even joke about this now. Like he's a sales and marketing leader at his core, at his heart. But he will tell you now he is a reformed marketer because he now realizes everything with marketing is actually operations. And at my core, being an engineer, of course, I just remember doing statistics classes of like, what are the probability of this happening? Or, in a warehouse, it's like, how fast can you get this package out the door on a conveyor belt that's 6 miles long? And so it was just constant optimization at all times. And so that's truly what I wanted to bring to Crisp was really, how do I systematize this? How do I make things repeatable? How do I make them consistent? And the way, I say this to law firms all the time, but it's like the way your bottom performer operates, that is actually your standard. And so, how do we standardize to raise that across the board? So it wasn't just processes, it was also data. So, as I mentioned, I took so many statistics classes, and data is just such an objective measure. And so for us, I mean, we track everything within this company, like how long everything takes, what was the rating for that, what was the cost for that, every single aspect of it. Because data never lies. At the core, data never lies. And that was a huge part of my background as well.
Wow. So your coaching strategy is more like engineering precision.
Yeah, it really is.
So what are the biggest challenges you've faced coaching legal industry leaders?
Yes, honestly, I think the biggest challenge for any business, whether it's legal or any other, is always people. And whether it's people, if your firm is 5 people, or people, if your firm is 200 people, I will tell you it never gets easier. That is probably something no one wants to hear. But at the core, people are at the root of every problem, and people are at the root of every solution. And we really, truly live by that. Um, I actually had a mentor tell me once, though, and he's like, you can literally predict a category 5 hurricane, but you cannot predict what people will do. And there is always the chance that, someone will blindside you with something, whether it's the way they behave, whether they put in their notice, whatever that is. We try to make it as predictable as possible, but people will always be the biggest challenge.
People are not predictable. So at the core of every problem are people, at the core of the solutions are people as well. Wow, that's
Yes.
profound. So how do you keep up with the changing landscape of the legal industry?
Yes. So, I mean, there's a plethora of information, of course, out there. And, Michael and I stay very ahead of things. And also, it's really just being in tune with our clients. And that's really the biggest thing for us is reading things, absorbing that, and just constantly having a pulse on things. And so that is why every single workshop, whether I'm fully conducting the workshop or not, I will be at every single one of them with our clients, because that's where I learn the most. And that's where I hear what are the biggest pain points or challenges. And that's how I can try to help our clients get ahead of what those things are. So it's listening.
So, wow, it's all about listening. Now, how do you develop your coaching plan? And it's like, is it one size fits all, or do you personalize the coaching plans according to each client?
That is a great question. Yes, it is definitely not a one size fits all by any means. I think wherever people are in their journey, they're facing different problems. And so, as I mentioned, although people will always be a problem, you just end up having different people problems. And so, one core thing, though, regardless of where a firm is at in their growth, is really the root issue of things. And so that's one way that, people don't always agree with our coaching methodology. Sometimes people are like, well, just tell me how to do it and give me the manual A to Z and everything. But one of our biggest methodologies is really the root of like teaching people how to think. And how do you get to this end conclusion? And how do you understand, the thought process and the steps that maybe you did that? But if you can teach someone how to properly think and how to, what I often say is we want to solve a problem. We don't want to fix a problem. So you actually you don't want to just fix it with band-aids and band-aids, but how do you actually solve it? And if you can teach someone to think that way, they can solve any problem, truly.
Teach people to think, and they'll be able to solve the problems. That sounds like an engineering theory.
Yes, you might be onto something there.
Can you tell us some of your success stories at Crisp?
Absolutely. I mean, it's funny to even talk about myself and think of, the way that people have grown and evolved. And, if I even think about some clients who from, the client perspective of just the things that they implement and they take into place and do everything. I've worked with law firms before who have truly, I will say, such an old school mentality, and you would think that they would never change, and every person has been with them for like 30 years. But seeing someone like that embrace something as maybe profound as KPIs, key performance indicators, and something that they never ever thought was an option in their firm. But then when they implement those and they see the return on that so quickly, and they see truly what their team is capable of, and now they're moving cases along at like twice the speed of what it was before, that to me is such a win, because they didn't even know that was possible. And being able to see that and to actually, then speak to them and say, hey, they have been year over year, 100, 200% growth, just by making those incremental changes.
What I found interesting is that earlier you mentioned that you never saw yourself being a teacher, and you ended up going to school to become an engineer. You worked as an engineer, and now you end up being a coach. And most of the things you do as a coach is teaching.
Yes.
Because you end up teaching other leaders. How was it for you when you first started out teaching these leaders? Because I know, especially being a woman, there'll be some kind of pushback because people will assume that you don't have the wisdom to share. How did you overcome that? And how was it for you when you first started?
That is a great question. So I actually never set out to do this, which is the funny part. A lot of times I actually tell people that some of the best leaders actually never really set out to be a leader. And I think it kind of goes the same with coaching and teaching. And I think it's a really big self-awareness thing as well. So it's funny, even when I do coach or mentor some of our team members, and maybe they are fresh out of school and they want to climb the ladder, and they want to lead and do all of these things, and it's like really just truly be in tune with yourself and seeing that. And I think that's actually another huge win on the internal side with our team, is teaching people that self-awareness, because I have seen so many team members of ours who maybe initially thought they wanted to lead, but they became so much more aware of themselves and were like, you know what, I'm an amazing individual contributor and I want to stay in that position. And they've like learned that about themselves just through their journey here. So I never necessarily set out to say, hey, I'm going to do this. But once I started doing it, it really just became such a fulfilling thing for me. And hearing again, like the wins and seeing people overcome things that they never thought that they could overcome, and just being a part of that, it makes you want to do it forever.
Yeah. So when you discovered coaching, you felt fulfilled, which is again your purpose.
Yes.
It's been over almost a decade since you've been at CRISP, and there's been tremendous growth. Do you want to share with us how you have helped develop and grow the company?
Yes. So I'm like, how much time do we have here? No, so like I said, I came in when there were 7 team members, and at that time we were only doing video production. And when I say video production, it was anything and everything. We had just only worked with one attorney when I actually came into the business. And so it's really looking at, where were some of the pivotal moments within that. And so since at that time we were only doing production, I think my biggest accomplishment at that time was just simply putting a production process in place. There was nothing. We would show up to your shoot, we would give you your video, you might approve it, you might not. Like there was nothing in place there. And so just initially standardizing that was such a win for me from that perspective. And then I think really seeing the leaps that we've made and anticipating needs. So once we started really working with the legal industry, we then saw a real need for marketing. And that is a place where it's funny, because I never thought I would do anything in marketing. I'm, engineer. And I will never forget this conversation. I spoke to a client and I was like, well, how is your video doing? I can't wait to hear how, the feedback has been and the reception to it. And he said, well, I haven't even put it on my website, so I don't know. And my first thing was, you're never going to see an ROI. You're never going to get anything out of this video unless you actually market it. And at the time, in hindsight, I really see it now. Marketing is ops. I didn't really know it at the time, but then it was like, all right, well, I can build out a process there, and I can also make this repeatable. And then after that, it came full circle then to coaching. And so there've just been some really pivotal moments for us. And I think being a part of building that foundation has been really instrumental to Crisp. And then I honestly think one of my biggest contributions at Crisp has just really been the team, the hiring, the people, the culture. It is something that will always be near and dear to my heart. Like we have a fabulous, amazing COO, an amazing head of people, and that is just one place that I will always be part of because our team is the reason that we have everything, truly.
Thank you for sharing that with us. And what can you speak to the importance of having good leadership in place in an organization?
Absolutely. I think this is one of those things with leadership that people have to lead by example. It really sounds so cliche, but leaders really set the tone. And I am the first to tell you I've made a million mistakes in hiring. I've made a million mistakes in putting people in the wrong seats, but leaders really set the tone. And I've learned that, the hard way. And if you don't have the right leaders in place, I can think of sales leaders we've even had in here before. I mean, 6, 7 years ago, and they're like, it's impossible. We can't do this. This is not the way that we're going to hit this goal. We can't hit the goal. And then Michael comes in and he's able to hit the goal. And so the team then believes in that. And so really the leadership team that you build really actually does build the culture. And that is something because if you really think about when you grow and when you truly scale, you don't have time to sit down with every single team member anymore. You don't have time to onboard every single person anymore. And I mean, now I don't even interview every single person anymore. And so you have to make sure that your leadership team is just truly ironclad because things will get diluted. It happens. And I think that's something as an owner, everyone has to just learn and accept. No one will ever do it the exact same way that you do it. The goal is actually that you hire someone who does it better than you. But your leadership team is an ambassador for you and your culture, and it really is your brand and who you are because everything that you're saying and teaching as a leader at the top, I really view it as like outward. I don't ever want to think of it as like we're pushing culture down or pushing it out, actually. And that's really on the leadership team.
The leadership team is a reflection of the old brand, of the old team, of the old structure.
Mm-hmm.
And talking about leadership, because when you came to Crisp, like you mentioned, you were only supposed to be there for 30 days. And I was talking to Michael the other day, and he was like, well, I don't even know what she's talking to me. It seems like you have this natural intuition for discovering gold or potentials or leaders. So what did you see in him? I want you to answer that question. Since I was wondering what you saw in him.
No, that's a great question. So, with Michael, I truly, before I even had worked here with Chris, but with him, I had never met anyone who was so laser focused and who could work so much and so hard. And so with him, it was like, I know he's not going to give up. He is one of the most like relentless people that I know to this day. And that will always be the case. And I really respected that so much because I was like, wow, there aren't a lot of people like that. Um, and of course, at that point, I mean, we'd already been together for a couple years, and I was like, you know what? I really just want to help you. But I think one thing with me just helping people as a whole, and I always do reference like Print or Colby or anything, but one of my numbers in Print is to be knowledgeable and smart. And what that really means at its core is I'm naturally a very inquisitive person. And I simply want to just poke holes in things. I always kind of look at it as like Swiss cheese. And I'm like, where could this fall apart? Where might this go wrong? And it's not a pessimism by any means. It's more of like a realism of looking at it and saying, okay, let's be realistic. These are all the failed points or all of the things that could go wrong in the situation. And then really just developing a process and a business and people and culture and everything that would deflect the bad from happening. And so it's putting the guardrails and the parameters in place, and just asking the right questions. I truly always say it comes back to active listening as well.
Thank you. Because the what you guys have built and where you are right now, because a lot of people, not a lot of people, you don't see the process. You only see the product, but there's always a process before the product. And you don't see the seed, you see the tree. So During the process, when things were not the way it used to be, because there would be some failures along the line, how were you able to hold yourself up, knowing that we're going to get through this?
Yes, there have definitely been many long nights, many long weekends, many sleepless nights, all of those things. And in hindsight, it's crazy everything that we have accomplished. But I think one of the hardest parts, as you are growing and scaling, is that there are so many people truly relying on you. And I take that responsibility very, very seriously because it's one of those things, and it's heavy lies the crown. And I by no means say this in like a martyr perspective. I always think everything that you do is a choice. Nothing is really, I don't even think of things as a sacrifice because I choose to do this. But especially, on the road up to all of this, like Michael and I, we didn't really have the luxury to call in sick. You don't really have the luxury of saying, I don't feel like doing that today, because whatever it was that we were doing, of course, that affects every single person downstream. And so when you think about just building that up time and time again, you really think about it being like a muscle, and you build that strength and you build that resilience just to say, like, I can get through anything. And it really goes back to the mindset of it, of like, the choice here that I'm making is to find a way at whatever cost it is. And so, before kids, of course, I was here 24/7. There was like, no, Crisp is my first child. But it's funny because, in 2018, the problems I had then, I thought were maybe the end of the world. But because of that resilience and that muscle, I can look back at those problems now and almost like laugh at them. And I'm like, oh, that was so cute that was my biggest problem then, versus the problems that we face now.
Wow, yes. Yeah, recently I wrote something about something like that, about facing your giants. Sometimes when you face new giants, you have to remind yourself of the old giants that you've conquered, and that can help you to overcome the new giants.
Yes.
And you just mentioned that to move forward, you have to be willing to go through walls if you have to. You actually did that in November at the last summit, because you came to that summit on crutches. Can you
Oh,
tell us what
yes.
happened?
Oh, gosh. Yes. I will tell you, this is one that, it's the things you never ever think could happen. So I've never actually broken a bone in my life, and by a total freak accident, literally 3 weeks before our biggest event that we've ever done, I actually broke my kneecap in half. So just a clean break in the patella. And I probably, I didn't really have that much time to think about it. And it was like, all right, the summit is 3 weeks away. So I gave myself basically a week, and I went back and forth and was like, all right, am I going to present at the summit? Am I not going to present? I've never felt this amount of pain in my life. I've never gone through anything like this before. And my biggest thing was like, I just don't want to let down anyone. I really just don't want to. And in my head, in my mind, of course, we figured out everything every time. And it's like, all right, I'll find a contingency. I'll do another way. I'll figure this out. But I mean, this event was at Mercedes-Benz Stadium. Like, I knew also the flip side of this was, when else am I going to speak and be on stage in Mercedes-Benz Stadium? And finally, like I said, I gave myself a week. And then after that, I was like, there's no more. There is no more like grieving this. There is no more uncertainty about this. And truly, in that moment, I was like, I'm just going to find a way. And so the second they said I could start PT, that is literally what I did. And I told them I do not care about walking at this point. I only need to be able to stand for an hour. And that's all that we're going to work to for 2 weeks. And so I also thought about all the speakers that we had there, and it was like, all right, I've got David Goggins, and he's always like, you don't know your limits until you go all the way to your limits. And then I'm thinking about Cy Wakeman, and she's like, your circumstances are the reality in which you must succeed. And so I was like, there's no excuse at this point. But truly, until you're in that moment, you don't really know your limits, and you just push until you can't push anymore.
Being relentless, and that's what you did. And you
Yes.
delivered a wonderful speech.
Thank you very much.
And how do you measure the success of your coaching programs that you develop?
Yes. So we have so many different ways of measuring this, but truly it all comes obviously to the clients, but not just their feedback, but it's truly the impact that we make on our clients. And so seeing things from, like I mentioned before, the story about implementing KPIs, or seeing someone who never thought that they could purchase a building and they purchase a building. And our 5-year vision, because you've probably heard it a million times now, but to be able to impact 1,000 law firms by at least $1 million each to create that $1 billion impact in the legal industry. And then it's the ripple effect from there. And there is nothing that warms my heart more than when I hear these things. And, I talk to a client and she says, she's in tears telling me that I will never see the impact fully that CRISP has made. And she's like, you don't see my team members and how happy they are to come to work now. You don't see them leaving with a smile to go pick their children up from school. You don't see the impact that their spouse even feels from the changes that you've made on them and the firm. And so down to, crisp experience and training the team members there. But it's just the new growth that we are providing across the board, not just for the firm owners, but it's also for their community, the jobs that it's creating through the law firms for the whole legal industry, like all of this. It's amazing. And just to be able to be a part of that and to know that, we were in some part of that ripple effect, and starting that ripple is so rewarding.
Because of that ripple effect, it's not just what you do with the coaches, it's the ripple effect to the staff, to the community as a whole. That's success itself.
Yes.
So how do you stay motivated? Because I know the job can be all fun every day.
That is right. So, there are some days are absolutely harder than others. And I think any business owner can relate to that. Um, I firmly believe, though, if you have a strong enough why, you will always find a way. And again, I think it goes back to that, the choice that you make to have this impact, and whether it's also the impact, of course, on our clients, but also our team members. And my heart is just so full, when I see someone get married and I'm at their wedding. I see someone take their child to Disney for the first time. I see them buy their first home together, like all of those things. And to get a message, they'll send Michael and me a message and it's like, thank you so much that Chris was part of that. I actually received a message this past week from someone in production, and he's trucking along on his career path. And he was like, Jessica, Michael, this is what I have dreamt of since I've been 18. Like, these financial goals I have hit, and I never thought it was possible in the creative space. And you guys have given me that opportunity. And when you have people like that around you, and you know that every decision you make impacts them and it impacts the clients and their team members, I never ever thought we would be where we are today. But you just find a strong enough why and you find a way.
If you know your why, you will find a way. Can you share with us some of your tips for effective leadership?
Yes. So I think, first from the very core, as I was saying, they have to lead by example. And that is a culture within itself. But I think one of the biggest things for any leader in any industry is truly active listening and truly understanding what someone's goals are, and truly understanding what motivates them, and understanding every single team member is different. They are very, very different. And you cannot treat them all the same. You cannot talk to them the same. You cannot motivate or empower them all the same. But really understanding, like, hey, what is their end goal in this? And how can I help them get there? What does that look like? And then I think another huge tip out of all of this is truly empowering your team members. Don't just solve things for them. I think that is one of the biggest things I've done literally from day one. You can ask any team member, especially if they've been here several years and I literally trained them from the beginning. If they ever came to me with any question, I would always say, what do you think you should do? If I were not here, what do you think you should do? How would you solve this? And I think it really goes back again, teaching them how to think, teaching them instead of just giving them all of the answers all the time, instead of solving things for them, is really empowering them to do that. And another big thing is truly like get out of their way. I mean, that is one of the biggest things. And I was actually just in a leadership meeting earlier today talking about that, because obviously as we've grown, there's a lot more layers between me and each team member now, but it's never to say they can't come and access me by any means. But I remember when I first gave up all finance, and whether it was approvals, whether it was payroll, like any of those things, everyone by nature just kept still coming to me. That's what they knew. There were 50 people. And so I would just like answer it, answer it. And then in the kindest way possible, the person now who's over finance, she was like, Jessica, if you continue to do this, I cannot do my job. And that really hit me and really resonated hard, because I was like, I'm actually getting in your way right now. So if you're going to give something to your team members and you want them to succeed, train them, get them ready, and then just get out of their way.
Train them, get them ready, and get out of the way. And for you to be an effective coach, you also have to make your brain or your person a sponge for new knowledge. So, what's your self development process?
Yes. So, as you know, I've got two little ones, so they keep me very, very busy. Podcasts are a huge thing for me, just because those are, I listen in the car, listen while I get ready. But it could be podcasts on anything, whether it is parenting, whether it is business, whether it is health and wellness. I truly believe someone needs to be a strong leader holistically. So, everything really has to find its way to level out. And I don't really mean that in terms of like balance. I think that's something that, can be misinterpreted in so many different ways. And, Michael even said this recently. The level of balance that he and I have now is very different than the balance we had 4 years ago, even 2 years ago. But to get to that level, we had a very significant imbalance for several years. And so understanding that, but then understanding holistically, how do I make myself better all around? Because during some of those years, of course, I neglected my health, or I neglected relationships or things like that. And so now when I am constantly a sponge and trying to learn and just absorb more information, it's all mental nutrition just to be a better person as a whole. And all of that in some way or another always ties back to business. And there's always something to learn out of anything. And so, as you grow, you're going to outgrow some people, and that is okay. And that was a hard lesson for me at first, because I really value so many relationships, but I always make sure that I am surrounded by people that I can learn from. I joke, I'm like, I want to be the dumbest person in the room, because I just want to keep absorbing and learning and making myself better so I can make others better as well.
Loss is part of growth. And some of those losses can be people as well.
Mm-hmm.
So, how do you manage the rigors of managing crisp at the moment and balancing that with family?
Yes. So I think whenever any expansion in your life happens, whether it be adding team members, adding family members, you really need to be very clear on what your non-negotiables are. And again, for several years, I didn't really have that luxury and everything was on me. But I think that's the biggest place to start. So before we even had our oldest daughter, I really was like, I want to be there every single night. And this is coming from a person who really was, at the office till 10 o'clock every night, and in the office every Saturday and Sunday. And so this was giving up a huge part of what I did at Crisp, but I understood and knew like this is a non-negotiable for me. And so for over 4 years now, for the most part, I am home every day by 6:30. And that is where I am going to do bath time. I'm going to do dinner, whatever that might be. But I'm going to get in those 2 hours with my girls. And if I still need to work after that, 100%, I will. And I don't mind that at all. But I think it's really defining those things. But if you don't know your non negotiables, then you really can't show up fully for your team or your family. And if you don't know those non negotiables, some part of you will start resenting something else. And you may not know why, but I think it's really defining those things and just understanding like, what am I not willing to compromise on? Because I promise you, you find a way to get creative. You find a solution for it. You still have the same number of hours in the day, I always joke moms are like super women because you figure out how to do all of it in the same amount of time, but you still get it all done.
You still get it all done. So, what are the biggest misconceptions that you are aware of that people have about coaching and leadership development?
Some of the biggest misconceptions, honestly, I think, especially when it comes to CRISP, is probably that Michael and I are not attorneys. And of course, it's like, well, you're going to lose clout right there because, you don't know, you don't understand what happens at a law firm. And I will go back to people again, and people are at the core of any business, every business. And so that is a big misconception. And I truly think, regardless of what type of practice you have, what type of business you have, there's that we don't know what we're doing. The other misconception, I think, for coaching oftentimes is people think that they're just going to get a manual or a playbook and everything's just going to happen for them. And I actually will joke with some clients and I'm like, you know what? I could literally hand this over, every piece of content that we have done for the past 5 years, and I could give it to a brand new firm. And I promise you, they will not catch up with you. Like, the implementation is the other half of that. And our most successful clients and most successful people truly understand that half of what they do is learning, but the other half is actually taking that back and implementing it. So I can coach you on a great hire. I can coach you on a great process or client experience, but I cannot physically go do it for you. And I think that's a big misconception with coaching is you still have to do the work. I think you look at an athlete, like they can tell you how to be better, but you still physically have to go do the work as well.
You still have to do the work. Yes. So, can you share some advice for women who are who wants to succeed in a male-dominated industry like the law and engineering?
Absolutely. So first and foremost, I don't think I even realized when I went into engineering how much of a male dominated industry that it was. And until I started going to classes, and there were like 5 out of 100 of us were women. And I think the biggest thing with that is almost over preparing because you do have to prove yourself a little bit more sometimes. You've got to work a little bit harder with that, just because people will come in with those misconceptions. And whether they are true or not, you're probably are going to have to prove a point. But I also think the other side of that is sit at the table where you are accepted and sit at the table where you're accepted as who you are. I will tell you right now, we have so many amazing females in our coaching programs, and they are just relentless people who don't stop. And they have found a way, and just find a place that is what they support, because there are going to be friction points along the way always. Um, but also just be confident in what you're doing and give the best that you can give out of all of it, because the right people will recognize that. Whether you are purple, yellow, blue, a woman, or a man, they will just recognize that you are the best for that role.
The right people will recognize your talents and your skills, regardless of your gender, color, or what have you.
Exactly.
And how do you ensure that the coaching programs that you develop remain inclusive, equitable, and takes diversity you know, into the process,
Yes,
into
exactly.
consideration?
That is honestly something that we really think about frequently. And it's really even thinking about it from as big of a stage as our summit speakers and understanding, hey, we're speaking to everyone in this. And it's just we have a big platform and we know that. And we also even think about what events are we attending and where are we representing. So for example, we just went to a conference that was women only. We actually have a lot of our clients who ask us to host like women only conferences and seminars and things like that. And so we are constantly thinking about that and understanding, like, where are our clients coming from? Where are they attending? I think you really do have to be intentional about thinking about that. And it's something that's just so important to us because I think every person has a story, whatever their background is. And I think that every person has that ability to contribute and add a different perspective. So it's something we're just really mindful of about our clients, speakers, our platforms, everything, because we know we do have that reach and we only want to have a positive impact on that reach.
Thank you. Can you talk about the importance of empathy when it comes to leadership and even when it comes to coaching?
Yes, yes. So empathy is definitely something. I think you have to lead with empathy, which can sometimes be a little bit hard. And I think you have to lead with trust. Otherwise, you will literally never get anywhere. And that's coming from me, who might be one of the most skeptical people ever. But I really, from a very early time, and Chris, but Michael and I both always said, like, I'm going to assume positive intent. And I'm going to assume that they're not doing this maliciously. And I'm going to put myself in their situation and understand, where they're coming from. And honestly, most of the time is even, where have I failed? Like, whatever situation they're in, did I contribute to that? Because I want to have empathy in the whole situation, and I want them to be, understanding the root issue of things. So maybe a team member comes in and they're having a bad day. A coaching client is with us and, it's been a bad quarter. I want to understand that, but I also want to understand, what could I have done differently in that situation to make it a more positive outcome. But always, always, I assume positive intent first.
Thank you. We are in a changing landscape when it comes to technology and in the industry. So, what role does technology plays in your coaching program, especially with new technology developing almost every single day?
Yes, yes. So I think technology is so important, because I think it is definitely something that gives people the edge and what is the next step. And you have to be aware of those things so that you don't get left behind. We actually just brought in a speaker to our workshops on ChatGPT and AI, because that is the next wave. We all know that's the next wave, whether you're in denial about it or not. But we're always want to be on the pulse of what's next and help our clients have that same pulse as well. So it might be that, it might be, even from the standpoint of capture now and saying, how can we better automate intake for our clients even. But technology is absolutely the future, and we want to make sure our clients are equipped for that. And we do our job in educating that on the front end.
Thank you. Yeah, and CRISPR has grown so huge, especially with the kind of summit and the kind of gift you give away. You give away Teslas, you give away G wagons, you give away luxury cars. So and you've had a summit in the stadium. How big can you get? What's next?
That is a great question. So there won't be another Mercedes-Benz for the moment, but our next big thing is actually the moon. So, everyone was like, what are you going to do next? We've given away like dozens of cars at this point, and now with our rewards program, we want to send someone to the moon, because
Can
why
you
not?
tell us more about that? Now you're shooting for the skies.
Absolutely. So it all started honestly with the first Tesla, because we knew that people were not going to be motivated by, Amazon gift cards and Starbucks gift cards. And so it was a Tesla, and then another Tesla and another. And then, like you mentioned, the G Wagon, which hope you're enjoying that one. But all of the cars. And then of course, once you do this bar, people expect so much. They're waiting for the next thing. And so we truthfully we're like, all right, well, what are we going to do next? And we're sitting in a brainstorming meeting, and someone said, you know what, Virgin Galactic can send people to the moon now, so why don't we put that out there and have our clients have the opportunity to actually go to the moon? And our whole mindset is like, why not?
There you are. CRISP is taking people to the moon. And your daughter is going to be turning 2 soon. So you're going to be having another terrific 2 in the household. What does that
Oh,
feel
yes.
like?
Yes, so she'll be 2 tomorrow. I actually joke with the older one, it wasn't really terrible 2s, it was terrible 3s. So I'm hoping I get another year of this before the terrible 3.
I call it terrific 2.
Terrific too. We'll put it that way.
Yes. Terrific too. Terrific too. Wow. And, thank you for your time on Legal Angle. But before we leave, I'm going to ask you this question. What does it mean to be a game changer? What does being a game changer means to you?
Yes, our whole platform, everything is about being a game changer. And I truly think that a real game changer is a very selfless person, especially when it comes to, my role and the things that I've done over the years. But it's just understanding people's needs. It's understanding, it's listening, it's having the empathy that we talked about, is leading by example. It's making the choices to stay late or to help others and do that. But then it comes back tenfold after. So I think if you really are a strong leader and a selfless leader, it will always come back to you.
Thank you. Thank you once again for coming on this show and for answering all the questions and for being a great guest. Thank you.
Thank you so much. It was so, so great being on here with you. I appreciate it.
I appreciate you as well. And for those of you listening or watching this, thank you for joining us. Until next time, stay safe. Bye for now.